I am one of the business development directors at Engaging Networks. But before I worked at Engaging Networks, I spent a long time working as a fundraiser in the charity sector. I did about 15 years in various individual giving roles, so I've got a background of having at least a passing interest in how charities generate money. And my job at Engaging Networks has evolved over the last few years. I've been at the company for about 4 years now, and I've started selling the platform in a number of different markets, including markets across the EU and in the US and Canada. And so I wanted to kind of share some of the learnings that I've taken away from those markets. And it's by all means not all of the different learnings, but it's things that I think that we can take away in the UK and maybe start thinking about how we adapt our approaches based on experiences found elsewhere in the world. So just to start off, I did talk a little bit about the UK to our international colleagues when I was at the IFC. And I tried to talk about what we were really good at. I've tried to pick out things that nations do really well. But I will say that I did say that the UK I represent as a slightly sleepy dog, because I think our reliance on direct debit has made us quite sleepy and quite lazy in many ways when it comes to generating money. And so I think there are things that we can learn from other markets that can help change that. But similarly, I thought there were lots of things that our international colleagues could learn about supporter stewardship and journeys, how we keep people giving and keep people engaged across very long periods of time, and also about how effective we are at moving people onto a legacy fundraising pathway, which, would you believe, isn't so big in the United States as it is in our market. It's something that we're very, very good at. But we didn't come here to hear about what we're good at. We came here to talk about kind of other countries. So I do think that in the EU especially, they are very, very aware of what's going on internationally, especially in Germany, the Nordic countries and the Netherlands. So I've tried to represent them with quite an alert little dog. I think that happens despite the EU consistently bringing in laws that limit what fundraisers can do and that make doing business quite difficult for a lot of organisations working in nations kind of within the EU area. So the first takeaway I took from organisations that I've spoken to in the EU is that they are fantastic, as you may expect, at working across borders. In kind of the Nordics, in Germany, in Holland, they run really sophisticated multi-language and multi-currency campaigns that leverage technology like the technology we have in Engaging Networks to generate lots of income from a diverse range of audiences. A great example of that is the Greenpeace's Protect the Oceans campaign. That launched across 40 different nations in more than 20 languages. And it's inspired more than 5.5 million people to take action across the kind of EU area. The Canadian market's also very good at this, as you may expect. And the thing I take away from that is the level of respect it shows their supporters. It provides people with content, especially in online channels, that are properly localized, and it can be done in a really inexpensive way. I think we live in a nation that's incredibly multicultural. And I don't think I've ever worked for a charity that identifies what language people want to be spoken to in. We don't look at our audiences and try to see the world from their perspective. I'm from Wolverhampton, as you may be able to tell from my accent. It's one of the most diverse cities in the UK. And there are areas in Wolverhampton where the shop signs are in Punjabi and Urdu. I don't know how many charities actually do that kind of translation for their audiences. Charities are very good at identifying what they want from these communities. I've been in lots of discussions about things like Ramadan campaigns, but there isn't the respect to actually think about the community and what they want from us. And so I would challenge people to learn from European charities and really think about how they localise and diversify the way that they speak to their supporter base. As in the UK, we saw our lists get severely constrained by the GDPR many years ago now. And I think in the UK, we kind of carried on doing things in a kind of business as usual kind of way, just with smaller list sizes, and went to try to grow those lists and grab opt-ins from people again, or from new audiences. There are charities across the EU that started to think a little bit differently about that and started to think far more about trust metrics and how they could get audiences to buy into the organisation, to trust them, and for that trust to then see them want to be communicated with and want to have access, want to give charities access to those kind of personal pieces of information. Again, Greenpeace in the Netherlands were a great example of that. They launched an open data campaign and provided their supporters with dashboards that showed the number of donations that were being given, the values, the costs of the campaigns that they were running, and the outcomes of those campaigns. And they tried to turn transparency into a strategy. They continued to remind donors of how their gifts were having an impact on real-world outcomes with continual updates on the campaigns that they were supporting. Now, in the UK, I've spoken to agencies that will allow you to kind of take trust metrics from your audiences so that you can understand how trusted you are as a charity. I also know from those agencies that trust in UK charities and the charity sector has been declining year on year for the last decade. In the EU, that's different. Trust is going the opposite direction, it's going up. And it's because the charity sector has taken a very different approach to trust. And there is a direct link between high trust and between sustained giving over time. So if you want to get the most out of your regular donor audiences, think about how you can turn trust into a strategy. And then the final learning I've taken from EU charities I've spoken to is the culture around testing. It's something I see a lot across the EU and probably in the States as well. Something seems to be changing in kind of the cultural landscape around especially digital tools. People kind of want an app for that. They want to be able to launch a form or an experience in a really simple way that doesn't involve much customization. It doesn't involve much coding if you have to dig into code. And I think that when I came into the sector, I was always told by line managers that you should always be testing, that you should always be trying to see if you're doing the best you can with the forms or with the direct mail packs or with the emails that you were sharing with your audience. UNICEF Netherlands talked a lot about their test-first culture. They've, over the last few years, tested hundreds of variants of pages, emails, and social ads. And they've also tested their approach to advocacy to donation experiences. And over that time, they've seen their page conversion rates increase by 40%. And they have seen their advocacy to donation rates increase by 20%. They've got one of the highest recurring giving retention rates in the EU, in the UNICEF network. So I would echo what my old managers once told me: please always be testing. So now we move to the Americans, and I don't think that needs to say much about the American attitude towards a lot of life. I think that while Europe has been very focused on optimization and trust, the US reminds us that energy and experimentation is key to keeping donors inspired. And I would also include Canada in this, because I do also work with organisations in the Canadian market. So the first thing I'll talk about there is, when I was a fundraiser, I loved the dynamism of American fundraising packs. Recurring giving, it hasn't been historically as prominent in America as it has been in the UK and in the EU, and that's changing a lot with the growth of what they would call sustainer giving. But because recurring giving wasn't such a story in the US, they had to keep inspiring people. There had to be dynamism because they had to keep people coming back to give cash gifts, campaign after campaign, year after year, time after time. And it means that US charities have a culture of being really inspiring, really colourful, and really powerful when it comes to donor and supporter messaging. And for me, there's no better example than Charity Water, and the way that they tell stories. So every donor, be it somebody giving $5 or an organisation giving 6 figures, gets personalised content from the organisation. And by personalized content, I don't just mean a little tweak to language. They share photos, videos, even GPS data that shows people the exact water project that they're supporting. Donors can literally track their impact. Every project is mapped, every project is updated, and every project is reported on. They've even made it part of their kind of core narrative. You're part of the solution and we'll prove it. So far, it's raised over $800 million. It's funded over 150,000 water projects and recruited 1.8 million donors. It's famous for recruiting donors who want to feel connected to a cause, and especially young donors. Their content is about feeling empowered, it's about impact, and it's not about problems. They make supporters the hero of the story. And rather than not communicating with donors or focusing on negativity, they want to create content that makes their audience feel, or makes the organization feel like part of their supporters' identity. It's underlined by the amount of communications they send out. In the UK, we send maybe 12 emails a year, supplemented with a few newsletters. They will send vast amounts of communication out. I think probably a conservative American charity would send 12 emails in a month. If you look at our email volumes on a day like Giving Tuesday, which is huge in America, we sent 100 million emails, or over 100 million emails last Giving Tuesday, and raised over $20 million. So there is a thing about the types of communication we send, but also the tone of that communication and the volume of that communication. The same's true about SMS. They use SMS far more in the US. I would also say, and this is something I keep hearing, stop sending newsletters and start sending single issue comms out, send more of them, and that stops this kind of choice paralysis that you see when it comes to sending out newsletters. Far more so than in any other market, I think the US has institutionalized peer-to-peer fundraising through their events programs with walks, runs, and other kinds of events, have been the cornerstone of fundraising calendars, but also in the way that they do several other things that I'll go on to mention in a few minutes. They use peer-to-peer platforms that make events platforms I've used as a fundraising professional look quite embarrassing and small, really. They treat their participants not as donors, but as ambassadors. So people who raise money, tell stories, and recruit other people to support the cause. They've modeled peer-to-peer at the intersection of advocacy, mobilization, and fundraising. It isn't just a fundraising channel. And they've tried to turn their supporters into campaigners that build awareness as well as money. A great example, if you want to look somebody up, is St. Jude's Research Hospital. They run one of the most diverse peer-to-peer portfolios anywhere in the world. They make it super easy to get involved, and they ask everybody to share online the story of what brought them into supporting St. Jude's. They've built and they've integrated powerful supporter communications tools into every journey, and they've incentivized community feedback through Facebook groups and through Discord. They run thanking events, virtual celebrations, and they cross-sell messages from across the charity, not just fundraising messages, trying to get people to give more or to raise more cash. Their program raises about $100 million annually. But for me, the really mind-blowing statistic, having worked a lot across events and peer-to-peer programs in the UK, is that they have 70% year-on-year retention rate, and I've never come across something like that in the sector before. In the UK, we've mastered sustainer giving. In Europe, they've mastered trust. I think that the US have mastered mobilization, and for me, it's an example of the most complete expression of an integrated supporter engagement journey anywhere in the world. So stop thinking of your peer-to-peer supporters as participants or event fundraisers, and start treating them as advocates. Build tools to help people tell their story and share it with the world. And think about content that your supporters can share with people that you've not met yet. Create moments to showcase the work that you are doing and the work that your supporters are empowering. And then this final learning may sound a little self-serving, given what engaging networks do. But a real difference, I think, between the UK and the US market that we see every day is around integrated teams. We frequently come across UK charities that go out looking for an advocacy platform or a fundraising tool or an email platform. But in America, you have people go out looking for an integrated platform. And that's because they want to talk to their supporters, as a cohesive audience, not as a donor or an advocacy supporter or a marketing lead. Charities in both the US and Canada are brilliant at pulling together their data and multiplying the impact of every piece of data beyond what I think we do in the United Kingdom. A great example of that is a charity called Planned Parenthood. So they pull all of their data into one place, building activism alongside fundraising with almost real-time donor segmentation or supporter segmentation that drive really personalized communication. Every petition, event sign-up, and email action is part of that defined supporter journey, and it blends engagement opportunities into a single personalized set of opportunities to engage with the charity, not just to give or to take the next advocacy action. They respond to issues in the moment and coordinate their responses across teams so that everything feels joined up and sensible. And it means that advocacy is one of Planned Parenthood's largest digital income streams. So over 40% of their total donor audience has been acquired through advocacy actions as the first moment the supporter has met the organisation. It's helped build one of the largest and most digitally engaged supporter bases on Earth, with over 20 million supporters on their database. Another good example of this, so over last summer, I was lucky enough to go to a conference called Bridge, which is a lot like our Institute of Fundraising National Convention, but on a very different scale. The International Fund for Animal Welfare presented a presentation about a similar subject called Like Milk and Cookies, Advocacy and Fundraising are the Perfect Pairing, which is quite an American title. And for them, their best performing advocacy actions weren't the actions that were successful. They were the actions where they weren't successful and they could build an experience on top of people's passion and frustration with the way the world was. Now, lots of charities I work with in the UK don't communicate with their audiences when an advocacy action is successful, let alone when they're not successful. And so I think there are things that we can think about, taking the day-to-day work, communicating it out, even when the message maybe isn't one of positivity, and think about how we build supporter experiences around that. So in general, I think every market that I experience is good at something. And one of the things that we should do is to steal shamelessly from around the world, pick and choose what works. Now, I was going to finish just by talking about some of the big questions I get asked by charities all the time in the UK, and to see if I can answer some of them with the way that people work elsewhere in the world. This is the most common question I get asked. What's the next Facebook? And it's something that I think charities struggle to answer. So as I mentioned, last August I attended a conference in the US, and I went to a fantastic presentation that featured our very own Faizan Farouk, who I saw walk into the room, alongside an organisation called Good Influence. They talked about how they are using influencers to build a larger audience. They concluded a number of things when they asked how they could diversify the channels they use to find supporters. So today, attention is fractured and potential audiences are everywhere. Gen Z and millennials trust people, not platforms. And that there isn't one new Facebook, that you have an ecosystem of creators and communities and conversations. So in the US, organizations like Good Influence are connecting charities with creators who connect them with their audiences. So creators who are aligned to the things that those charities want to do or are passionate about them. They look for creators that aren't necessarily on the charity's radar. And they then blend influencer and peer-to-peer messaging to harness the creators as advocates for the cause. And they will work through a diverse number of channels. So TikTok, YouTube, Twitch, Spotify, all of the kinds of channels that charities don't really make much money out of in the UK today. All of them outperform Meta when it comes to authenticity and reach. They look to tap into a creators community and they build engagement through partnerships and not one-off posts. And they pay to access that influencer's audience. Right now, TikTok conversion rates or TikTok click-through rates are 3 times that of Facebook. US nonprofits using the creator partnership on TikTok say that conversion rates are 50 to 70% higher than paid social ad spend, and especially amongst donors who are younger, under 30. That's, I think, 4 times they get 4 times the conversion rate. UNICEF USA's integrated creator strategy cut their CPA by nearly 30% year on year while growing sustainer signups by 22%. So if you're looking to diversify your acquisition channels, think about creators, influencers, and advocates. Empower those influencers to fundraise through storytelling. The next Facebook isn't a platform, it's your advocates. So stop chasing algorithms and invest in people. So how do I find younger audiences? And this is something that I think boards of trustees ask all the time. I am a trustee, I hear this quite a bit. Around 12 months ago, I was lucky enough to attend an IOF event with a charity called the PDSA, and they shared insights into their learnings from value exchange testing. They found that under 35s are 2 to 3 times more likely to respond to a value exchange than a giving appeal. Their value exchange isn't something expensive. It's not something that you need to post out in the mail to somebody. It's an online first aid guide for pets. Don't think of value exchanges as things that are expensive to send. They are things that give people a sense of action, access, belonging, or meaning. And if your first offer is a transaction, a lot of these younger audiences you lose before you've even started the conversation. The PDSA found that under 35s are 40% more likely to become regular givers within the first 12 months if they use a value exchange approach. And audiences under 44 are 2 to 3 times more likely to give than to a traditional ask. Other key things to think about with value exchanges are around capturing data, offering insight to people immediately as soon as they've started to build a relationship with you, and to think about the nurturing journey that comes after a value exchange has been sent to somebody. So I think the key here is to build participation products, not donation asks. To test, learn, and scale, one value exchange success can feed multiple channels through which you can find new supporters. And measure lifetime value, not cost per lead. And then the final thing I was going to talk about was what journey should I be putting my supporters on? So again, when I was in the US, I went to a great talk by the Americans do charity names unlike anywhere else in the world, a charity called Jews for Jesus. And that challenged the traditional marketing funnel. So they challenged the idea that we should be funneling people down towards loyalty and just keeping people there. And I really like that because I think we funnel everybody down normally towards giving because charities want to get a good return on investment for their acquisition spend. Moving away from this one-directional model, they looked to the private sector to kind of inspire them. And they talked about organizations like Netflix who don't stop advertising shows to you if you're a Netflix subscriber. They continually talk to people about what they can access, about different genres and different things that they may be interested in. And so they built a funnel that looks like this. So instead of squeezing people down towards a transaction, they wanted to pull people up through their mission, where every layer reinforces the whole, widens somebody's support, gets them to do more, and also increases the likelihood that they'll advocate for the organization to help them reach new supporters, to drive them towards a goal of becoming part of somebody's identity. They concluded that the most successful charities don't end journeys out loyalty. They work to become part of who the supporter is and for the supporter to get some sense of being through the charity. So when you stop thinking about retention and start thinking about somebody's identity, your supporter stops being a donor and becomes an amplifier. Every gift, every story, and every interaction should reinforce an answer to the question of this is who I am and part of what I do. Your supporters should feel like co-owners of your mission. So rather than thinking about funnels, try to think about value, try to think about belonging, and try to think about empowerment. So I think that is me at time.
Thank you, Paul. That was really interesting. Okay, we have a couple questions. Just a reminder to please put your questions in the app if you have them. The first question is about Charity Water. Do you know much about their tech setup?
I would have to look into their tech.
Okay, yeah,
So
just to enable that level of reporting back to supporters. What I know of their tech setup is that I am fairly certain it is extremely custom. Like I think it's built in-house.
I think that a lot of what they've achieved, though, as you're a room of engaging networks users, can be achieved using engaging networks and the data tools that we provide if you connect the various parts of the platform together and segment using our tools.
Yeah. Okay. We have seen the click-through rates from TikTok that you referred to, but not the conversion rate. What do you think those charities are doing differently to see that good conversion rate?
I think there's a piece around trust and authenticity. One of the things I think I said at the IFC event was that they unlock creators who have an audience and are trusted by that audience, and then the onward journey that they put people on from the click feels completely integrated with the experience that they've had. So, they use the brand that the influencer has to strengthen the donation ask and to continue that engagement right the way through.
Okay, great. All right. Any last minute questions?
Cool.
Okay, thank you so much, Paul.
Thanks, everybody.